August 1942, Japanese commanders laugh off America's PBY Catalina. Too slow, too ugly, too outdated to threaten their empire. Yet within months, those same ungainly flying boats will haunt the night skies of the Pacific as the legendary Black Cats, painting their frames with homemade matte black, hugging the waves below radar, and unleashing psychological tactics that sow panic far beyond bombs and bullets. Led by commanders sometimes barely 24, these crews transform weakness into deadly advantage, turning ridicule into one of World War II's greatest reversals. How did a rejected relic become America's forgotten night terror of the Pacific War? And why has its true impact been buried for so long? By late August 1942, the PBY Catalina was a punchline in Japanese war rooms. Commanders dismissed the ungainly flying boat as a relic, too slow to chase, too awkward to fight, too outdated to matter. In the official records, Japanese officers described the Catalina as a flying bathtub, a nuisance at best, and a target for sport when caught in daylight. American crews felt the sting of that reputation. Losses mounted on patrols, and the aircraft's broad wings and lumbering pace seemed to confirm every insult. Yet, as the war pressed deeper into the Pacific, a new group of leaders took command, most of them barely out of college, many just 24 or 25. These were not the seasoned veterans of earlier campaigns, but young men thrust into command by necessity, learning the art of war in real time. They inherited an aircraft with a reputation for obsolescence and a mission profile that spelled danger. The average Black Cat pilot was younger than the aircraft he flew, responsible for a crew of 7 or more on missions that stretched past 12 hours, often with no backup and little margin for error. In the squadron huts of Espiritu Santo and Guadalcanal, they studied enemy convoy patterns by lantern light, traded rumours about Japanese night fighters, and debated how to make themselves less visible to the gunners waiting in the darkness below. Command came with no manual, only the knowledge that every mistake would be written in fire on the sea. The first hints of transformation arrived not from headquarters, but from the crews themselves. Pilots and mechanics, frustrated with daylight losses, began painting their Catalinas with a homemade mixture of lamp-blackened soap, working by hand in the humid island nights. The results were crude, streaked and uneven, but under the moonless sky the effect was immediate. The blackened hulls slipped into the shadows, and enemy lookouts reported only a fleeting shimmer before the bombs fell. By October 1942, the nickname Black Cats surfaced in squadron banter and logbooks, a badge of pride for crews who had turned derision into identity. The first official mention appeared in late October as the new tactics began to draw results and attention from both allies and adversaries. In the words of one early Black Cat crewman, "We were kids, learning as we went. But the cat forgave our mistakes. She always brought us home." The nickname spread as quickly as the paint, and with it, a new sense of purpose. What began as an act of desperation became a symbol of defiance. The Black Cats were no longer waiting for orders. They were writing their own rules, and the enemy would soon learn that the night belonged to them. On the humid airstrips of Espiritu Santo, the transformation of the PBY Catalina accelerated with a series of field-driven innovations. Crews led by inventive minds like Donald J. McBride pushed beyond the black paint that had already begun to cloak the aircraft in secrecy. They mixed lamp black with soap, stirring the paste in battered drums and slathering it on with mops and brushes. The result was a matte surface that scattered moonlight and erased reflections, making the Catalina nearly invisible against a Pacific night. Maintenance logs from late 1942 record these impromptu paint jobs, noting that each coat lasted only weeks before salt spray and tropical rains stripped it away. The solution was simple: repaint often, and never let the enemy see silver or blue peeking through. Visibility from below was only half the problem. Japanese gunners had learned to track the orange glow of engine exhaust as it flickered across the night. To counter this, McBride and his ground crew scavenged oil drums and scrap metal, fashioning makeshift exhaust shrouds and baffle stacks. These crude flame suppressors, welded together in open-air workshops, cooled and dispersed the exhaust, hiding the telltale signature from ships and searchlights. Squadron diaries note the rapid spread of these modifications, with crews borrowing designs and materials from each other as new threats emerged. Some stacks rattled loose after a few missions, but the advantage they offered at night was too great to ignore. Precision flying in darkness demanded more than camouflage. The installation of APN-1 radar altimeters gave the Black Cats an unprecedented edge. With a glance at the dial, pilots could skim just 50 feet above the waves, trusting the instrument even when clouds erased the horizon. Squadron records from Guadalcanal show that this technology, borrowed from British night bombers, allowed the Catalinas to slip beneath radar and searchlights, hugging the ocean until the very last moment. The low-level approach, once a desperate gamble, became a signature tactic. Survival also depended on protection. Mechanics began bolting armor plate behind pilot seats and along the waist gunner stations. Maintenance reports details the trade-offs. Each added pound of steel meant less fuel or fewer bombs, but crews accepted the burden for a better chance at coming home. In the words of one mechanic, "We bent steel in the sand with sledgehammers. It wasn't pretty, but it stopped more than one bullet." By the end of 1942, the Catalina was no longer just a patrol plane in disguise. It was a field-bred predator, shaped by the hands of its crews and the demands of night combat. The combination of matte black paint, flame suppressors, radar altimeters, and improvised armor turned the Black Cat into an aircraft the enemy struggled to see, let alone destroy. The next phase would test these modifications in the crucible of combat, where every advantage counted. A blacked-out PBY Catalina, prowling low over the Pacific, carried more than its shadowy paint to the fight. The arsenal began with 3.30 caliber machine guns, one fixed in the nose turret, another guarding the tail, and a third mounted flexibly for ventral defense. Along the waist, 2.50 caliber Brownings bristled from the blisters, their heavy barrels ready to rake decks or silence shore batteries. Bomb racks beneath the broad wings could haul up to 4,000 pounds. General-purpose bombs, depth charges, or sea mines, depending on the night's target. For shipping runs, a pair of Mark 13 torpedoes, each weighing over 2,000 pounds, hung from reinforced shackles, their silver bodies dulled with soot and salt. But the true edge of the Black Cat was not just steel or firepower, it was the way crews weaponized the night itself. In the darkness, the slow cruise speed, just 125 miles per hour, became an asset, letting pilots line up precise bombing runs as Japanese lookouts strained to spot anything but shadows. Radar altimeters, installed behind the control yoke, allowed the Cat to skim 50 feet above the waves, invisible to radar and nearly silent until the attack began. Ordnance selection was both art and improvisation. 5-second delay fuses became standard for bombs and depth charges, giving the Catalina just enough time to escape the blast zone before detonation. The effect on enemy ships was chaos. Explosions erupted moments after the plane vanished, leaving crews guessing where the next blow might land. For convoys clustered in the dark, the uncertainty was as damaging as the shrapnel. Psychological warfare took on a physical form. Crews collected empty beer and Coca-Cola bottles, sometimes slipping razor blades or bits of metal into the necks. Dropped from altitude, these makeshift screamers whistled and shrieked as they fell, echoing across the decks below. Japanese survivors later described the sound as unearthly, a warning that the Black Cats were overhead, unseen but inescapable. Even when no bombs fell, the bottle tactic robbed enemy crews of sleep, sowing dread with every pass. Illumination flares, another tool in the Black Cat kit, were dropped just ahead of attack runs. Their blinding glare turned night into day for a few seconds, paralyzing gunners and exposing every silhouette on deck. In the confusion, Catalinas released their ordnance, then vanished into darkness before the defenders could recover their aim. Squadron logs note that flares were often coordinated between aircraft, flooding entire convoys with light and confusion in a matter of seconds. The combination of firepower, timing, and psychological manipulation made the Black Cat a predator unlike any other. Japanese convoy commanders began reporting not just material losses, but a growing inability to operate at night. The mere threat of a Catalina overhead, its guns, its bombs, its terrifying shrieks, was enough to freeze supply runs and drain morale. For the crews who flew these missions, every bottle, every flare, every delayed explosion was a reminder that war was fought as much in the mind as in the sky. Night after night, blacked-out Catalinas skimmed the Pacific at wave-top height, their engines throttled back to a steady 125 miles per hour. At this speed, a PBY could hover on the edge of stall, giving its pilot just enough control to thread between swells and shadows. The slow pace, once a liability, now became the key to precision. Crews could linger, line up torpedo runs, and pick out targets with a patience impossible in faster, flashier aircraft. Japanese convoy commanders, accustomed to evading high-speed threats, found themselves stalked by something altogether different, a predator that crept in unseen and struck with surgical accuracy. The campaign's scope widened quickly. 14 squadrons adopted Black Cat tactics, blanketing the Solomons, New Guinea, and the Bismarck Sea in a net of nocturnal interdiction. Each squadron operated in loose trail or staggered formation, rarely grouping close enough to risk detection, but always close enough to coordinate flares, bombs, and covering fire. In the cockpit, radar altimeters ticked steadily, keeping the Catalinas just 50 feet above the waves. Waist gunners peered through blisters, scanning for the faintest glimmer of a ship's wake, or the flash of a searchlight on the horizon. The most celebrated of these units, Patrol Squadron 11, under Lieutenant Commander Clarence Taff, became the standard by which all others measured themselves. Taff's leadership style was direct: mutual trust, shared risk, and a rotating, first-in approach that spread danger across the crew. After-action reports from December 1942 describe a series of coordinated attacks that devastated Japanese supply lines. Over 4 nights, VP-11 accounted for more than 75,000 tons of enemy shipping sunk or burning. Tankers, transports, and destroyers left crippled and adrift. The squadron's logbook tells of convoys scattered in chaos, their formation shattered by sudden flares and the roar of bombs. One entry reads, "We hit them in the middle of the night. The whole convoy scattered, some burning for hours. We slipped away before their fighters even knew we were there." This run of success was not luck, but the result of relentless adaptation. Taft's crews drilled attack profiles, trusting their instruments and each other in darkness so thick it erased the line between sea and sky. They learned to form up blind, to trust the altimeter, and to rotate lead positions so no one bore the risk alone. The Black Cat's endurance, missions lasting 12 hours or more, meant that a single aircraft could shadow a convoy all night, striking again and again until ammunition ran low or fuel forced them home. Recognition came swiftly. VP-11 became the first patrol squadron awarded the Presidential Unit Citation, an honour previously reserved for frontline combat units. The citation credited not just the squadron's tonnage sunk, but the innovation and courage required to rewrite the rules of maritime warfare. By early 1943, Japanese commanders no longer dismissed the Catalina as a relic. Instead, they issued urgent orders for night fighter reinforcements and new convoy protocols. The Black Cats had turned their supposed weaknesses into a weapon the enemy could neither predict nor counter. Their triumph was measured not only in ships destroyed, but in the transformation of the night itself, from a time of Japanese advantage to an arena of Allied dominance. Japanese supply lines, once the lifeblood of Pacific garrisons, began to unravel under sustained black cat pressure. Convoy logs from late 1943 show a steady decline in successful nighttime deliveries. The Tokyo Express, forced to shift to daylight runs, found itself exposed to Allied fighters and bombers. By early 1944, Japanese commanders recorded a new reality. Night no longer offered sanctuary. The Black Cats had helped drive enemy shipping losses to 2.8 million tons, a figure that haunted every logistics officer from Rabaul to Truk. Yet, for every convoy scattered, there was a cost paid in the cockpit. The same darkness that shielded the Catalinas also hid the dangers of the Pacific. Tropical storms swept across the Solomon Islands without warning. On January 11, 1944, a formation of 3 black cats vanished into a single night squall near Bougainville. Meteorological records describe winds topping 60 knots, sheets of rain erasing the horizon, and lightning that blinded even the most seasoned pilots. The official reports remain incomplete, but survivor accounts speak of aircraft lost without a trace. No distress calls, just silence over the radio. 12-hour missions tested the limits of every crew. Fatigue blurred the line between vigilance and exhaustion. Primitive identification systems failed in the chaos, and more than once, friendly fire incidents marred the night. The ocean, indifferent to human struggle, claimed as many Catalinas as enemy guns. For the men who flew, the price of dominance was measured not just in victories, but in the silent risks of the night. The Black Cats shattered enemy supply lines, but the skies remained as perilous as the waters below. Across the Atlantic, a different breed of Catalina prowled the night. VP-63, known as the Mad Cats, carried a new kind of weapon, magnetic anomaly detectors, or MAD gear, capable of sensing the faint magnetic signature of a submerged U-boat within a 400-foot radius. Early patrols over the Bay of Biscay found little success, but in the spring of 1944, the squadron shifted to the Strait of Gibraltar, a natural bottleneck for German submarines. In these narrow waters, Mad Cat crews worked in close coordination with Allied surface ships and RAF liberators. On February 24th, VP-63's Mad Sweep forced U-761 to the surface, where it was destroyed by waiting escorts. 2 more U-boats, U-392 and U-575, would follow in March, each detected by a Catalina's low-flying pass and finished by a swarm of Allied firepower. While the Black Cats hunted in the Pacific, Catalinas also flew for Australia's RAAF, whose crews specialised in aerial mining. Over 650 sorties, these Catalinas seeded more than 9,000 mines into enemy harbours and river mouths, crippling Japanese shipping from the Netherlands East Indies to the South China Sea. The mining campaign isolated entire garrisons, trapping ships in port and forcing supply convoys to risk open waters. No other amphibian matched the Catalina's reach. More than 3,000 airframes rolled off assembly lines in the United States and Canada, the largest production run of any flying boat in history. During endurance trials, a PBY stayed aloft for 31 hours and 45 minutes without refueling, a record that stood as proof of its staying power. Yet perhaps the Catalina's greatest legacy came not from war, but from mercy. Known as Dumbos, rescue crews plucked thousands of downed airmen and sailors from the sea, often under fire. Allied records credit the Catalina with saving at least 1,600 lives in the Pacific alone, with the true number likely far higher. For the men in the water, the sight of the broad-winged flying boat meant hope, survival, and a second chance. The Black Cat story, born in darkness and danger, left a legacy of ingenuity, endurance, and rescue that spanned oceans and generations. Between 1942 and 1945, Black Cat squadrons destroyed an estimated 2.8 million tons of Japanese shipping, forcing enemy convoys into daylight and reshaping the Pacific War. Through matte black paint, radar altimeters, and improvised tactics, crews turned a dismissed flying boat into a precision night predator. Official Navy records confirm that VP-11 earned the first presidential unit citation for a patrol squadron, while VP-63 hunted U-boats with new magnetic sensors. Yet, gaps remain. Some mission logs are still classified, and the full number of lives saved by Catalina rescue flights is unknown. Today, over 3,000 Catalinas are documented as built, their legacy extending from combat to humanitarian missions. The Black Cat story shows how ingenuity and adaptation can reverse the fate of even the most underestimated machines. Their impact endures in every record of a convoy disrupted, a crew rescued, or a mission flown through the darkness.